Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of the Central Bucks Senior Task Force. My name is Jim McGowan, and I'll be your host today. We meet on the first Monday of most months here at the Central Bucks Senior Center on Shady Retreat Road in Doylestown. We do not meet, however, in June, July, and August. But you can catch these shows anytime you want from the comfort of your own home on Comcast cable or on Verizon. Okay, on Comcast it's channel 22, and on Verizon it's channel 31. Today, you may recognize my guest today. He's usually sitting in this seat, but today he's sitting in the other seat, okay? He's the one that's going to be answering the questions today as I will be asking them. So I'd like to introduce for you Kevin Jameson. He is the volunteer director of the Dementia Society of America, and he has a lot to say about dementia, and I'm sure there's many people out there that have that question on their mind because it is something that is just seems to be growing in leaps and bounds, just as maybe cancer may have done 20 years ago when that got into people's mindset. Now it's as we're living older, and this is becoming the issue, perhaps the major health issue that we'll be facing over the next 20, 30 years as the baby boomers continue to age. So, Kevin, welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Glad to have you here.
Great to be here. Yeah.
I guess the first question I have is my own confusion between Alzheimer's and dementia. Okay? It seems like people may mention both of those terms in the same breath.
Right.
Okay, and not knowing what the relationship is
Understood.
of one to the other.
Yes.
So
it's great. So it's first of all, it's great to be here, and I really enjoy coming to the Central Bucks Senior Center because they've got a lot of activities going on. So I would encourage people who are watching and coming to this event on a monthly basis continue to, because coming out here you can get some real benefits. Health benefits, mental and otherwise. And that really leads to the discussion about dementia. And to answer your first question, what is the difference really between Alzheimer's and dementia? And we get that question a lot. In fact, it's probably our number one question.
Right.
And as such, the issue is similar to cancer. So if you think about it, used to be the C word.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
yes,
and we wouldn't talk about it. Now it's the D word.
Right.
Okay. But people oftentimes do kind of mix up and misconstrue the differences between dementia and Alzheimer's. So I'd like to clear that out.
Okay.
So imagine the umbrella of cancer. We'll start with that. Everybody understands cancer is kind of an umbrella set of conditions.
Okay.
And underneath that umbrella are conditions such as breast cancer, lung cancer, melanoma, leukemia. They go by various names based on the types of cancer that they are and where they are. And so it's really no different with dementia. So dementia is that umbrella term, similar to cancer. And then underneath the umbrella are forms of dementia: Alzheimer's, Lewy body, vascular dementia, frontal temporal dementia, CTE, which stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. This is what the football players are talking about today, right? With concussions.
Sure. That's on the news.
Wernicke-Korsakoff is related to alcoholism. Creutzfeldt-Jakob is in Britain, they termed it mad cow disease. But it's still a degenerative brain condition, which leads to a very aggressive form of dementia. So you have all of these forms of dementia, and they're named in many cases. So people often say so-and-so had Alzheimer's when that's also a question mark sometimes. And the reason that we think it's a question mark is that the science still cannot today prove that somebody has Alzheimer's beyond the shadow of a doubt until after death, until they actually
autopsy.
look at the brain tissue.
Okay. Question for you.
Yeah.
Dementia is the umbrella, and you had mentioned, one of the things you had mentioned was one of those long names that had to do with football players.
Yes, chronic
Okay.
traumatic encephalopathy,
Okay.
CTE.
I never played football.
Okay.
I may get dementia, but I'll never have that form of dementia, right?
Yes.
So that is like a profession. That's a profession which caused that result.
Concussions.
Okay?
Concussions.
Okay.
Right.
What about the others? The others could any one of the others like befall me as time goes on?
Well, do you have a brain?
I do. I think. Yeah.
Okay.
It's there.
You and I.
Wait. Let me knock it.
Okay, we're both there. We're at risk. If we
Okay.
have a brain, we're at risk. So the issue is not will you get it so much as could you have a form of dementia later in life or now even.
Okay.
The answer is yes, you could. But there's an increasing chance that you'll have a dementia as you age for a variety of reasons. But a lot of people do ask us about the genetic component
Okay.
to dementia, and in particular the genetic dimension to Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
So the really important thing, Jim, for everybody to understand is that just because you had parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles with a form of dementia does not necessarily mean that you will get it. That's number one. You may be at increased risk, but there are reasons for that risk, and we'll talk about that. In only a very, very small percentage of people is it clearly established that their form of Alzheimer's, typically referred to as early onset,
Okay.
when they get the dementia in their 40s and 50s, that type of Alzheimer's has been genetically linked from one to another.
Okay.
And they've done studies, in particular in South America, where they've identified populations of people where it is very much genetically passed one to another. There's a specific gene that they pass along. But for most people, you may be predisposed to something, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What steps can I take if there's suspected or actual dementia in my life in a relative, a friend, etc.? Okay. What's the first step here? Who's going to make that call?
Right. So let's go back and look at a couple things. The one thing we need to remember, and everybody who's watching and listening needs to think about, is that dementia is not a normal part of aging. Okay. Yes, you're at increased risk as you age, but for a variety of reasons. The other thing is that we do age. So luckily we age, right? Right. Luckily there's
The
four
alternative
quarters.
isn't good. Yeah.
There's a reason why there's 4 quarters to a football game, right? If it was an endless game, it really wouldn't be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So for the same reason, we age. And the thing that's really important to understand is that as we age, we may be having other issues that create an opportunity for dementia to be present. So let's take a look at them.
Okay.
One, in fact, the number one thing is heart disease. So think about your brain. Your brain is your computer. It controls everything that you do, right? You can't breathe, your heart won't pump, you can't speak, you can't see, you can't do anything without your brain. So in that way, your brain really does control everything. So when you have heart disease, think about what's happening with blood flow to the brain. So if blood does not flow to the brain, what happens in your opinion? I mean, if you don't get enough oxygen, what happens?
Unconscious.
Yeah, so your brain needs blood to have oxygen, and that oxygen is what, we live with oxygen, right?
Mhm.
So that's what the blood does, brings oxygen to different parts of our body. So if somebody has a vascular condition, think about the fact that, blood flow to the brain can be impeded. Now, we're not talking necessarily strokes here, but we're just talking in general. So think about cardiovascular disease, hardening of the arteries,
Okay.
right? It's just tougher to get that blood flow into the brain. And when that happens, your neurons in your brain can die. So we call that vascular dementia. Okay. So there's a good example, right? The other thing is head trauma. So when you think about getting smacked in the head, what happens? It's very similar to if you get a cut on your hand. If you get a cut or a bruise, even just a smack on your hand, what happens to the skin? What happens?
It opens up and it bleeds.
Could bleed, but it also inflames.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's why we take aspirin, right? We want to reduce the inflammation. It gets red, it puffs up.
Okay.
So think about the same thing happening in your brain. So you get whacked in the head, and your brain is really kind of locked into your skull. Where does that inflammation go? Right?
It could blow up.
Right, you have inflammation.
Go?
You have
Right.
inflammation. If you have inflammation and you don't treat it, the body has mechanisms to deal with it. But the important thing to know is that as the body attacks that infection or that inflammation, it can go into overdrive. And so there are some theories out there. They don't really know the exact science behind it, but they do believe that this inflammation can be a trigger for the neurons to die because they're almost being overly attacked.
Now that's in the situation where you have that concussion.
A concussion,
football
a
player
fall, you
Okay.
fall off the ladder, you
Okay.
trip down the stairs, you knock
Okay.
your head back when you sit down, not sit down, but when you're walking up the steps and you fall backwards,
Right.
and a car accident.
But when I was younger, playing sandlot football, I can remember this one incident. I didn't think about it until maybe about 30, 40 years later, but I tackled someone. Okay, we didn't have pads on or anything like that.
Right.
And I was out for the count because
Right.
as I tackled him, his knee was coming up and he smacked me in the head and I was flat out unconscious.
Right.
Okay. But that only lasted for like a play or two. Then I
Yeah.
said, okay, I'm ready. Let's go back.
You're back
into
in the
this.
game.
I'm back in the game.
But
You know,
here's
I'm
the
fine.
challenge, right? So 30, 40 years ago, when you were a teenager, or longer, we didn't think about those things.
No, we did
But
not.
now people wear helmets, there's protective gear, they take kids out of football, soccer, and other types of games when they get concussions. They used to just send them right back. Now there's a whole, standard operating procedure. When somebody gets a concussion, they take them out of school. They're not supposed to watch TV, they're not supposed to read. They're supposed to let their brain kind of return to their normal state. So that's one thing. So obviously protecting your physical head is important. Vascular disease, as we talked about. And then there's the other issue of diabetes and blood sugar and insulin. And they see some connections. Again, the science, if we knew exactly what was going on, there'd be lots of cures.
Exactly.
But there's not been a cure, and there still is not a cure. There are a lot of scientific trials and drug trials that have closed that weren't effective, and there's really still no really effective drug out there. So basically, when you're looking at things like diabetes, think about what happens when somebody has diabetes. What happens to their extremities?
Gets cold, no blood.
No blood, right? And you see a lot of times people get amputations, right? So is your head kind of an extremity? Is your brain an extremity, right? It's at the further, and it's not here, it's up here.
Right.
So there's a lot of thinking going on right now about insulin resistance and how that affects blood flow and how that affects the sticky plaque that you hear talked about with Alzheimer's. So, there are a lot of theories out there, and they don't necessarily know the answer today. But one thing, and we can talk about it today even, is what can we do for really good brain health? And that's an important kind of flip side to the coin.
It's another thought process I had here, and you mentioned diabetes. And I was going to ask you what is currently known regarding the risks of getting it, okay? If that's the right term to use, the
Sure it
risk
is.
of getting,
Yes.
dementia.
Mm-hmm.
What are some key steps we could take to slow down the progression? And I thought of that when I thought of diabetes, because, for example, diabetes 2 is a progressive disease, but it's also widely acknowledged in the medical community that the individual can take deliberate actions to
Yes.
stop that progression and
Yes.
actually reverse it.
Well,
Okay?
yeah.
Where's that fit into that possibility with Alzheimer's? Is that something that once it starts going, it's
Okay.
going to reach a conclusion, although you might be able to slow it down?
So I want to replace the word Alzheimer's with dementia.
Dementia, pardon me,
Okay?
yes.
No,
right.
but that's a.
Yeah.
But I say that to you because I want our viewers to know that too.
Right, understood.
Don't automatically make the two the same.
Right.
All Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, but not all dementia is a form of Alzheimer's.
Understood. And I know better than that.
No, you're good.
But sometimes
But here are the issues, right? So you can do a lot of things to manage the risk factor. But what's important to know that there are things that present like dementia, but that are not, and that can be reversed. They're not a permanent progressive dementia. They can actually be reversed or stopped. And those are things like drug interactions. So a drug interaction, you're taking, 8 different drugs, there could be an interaction there. So pharmacogenetics is part of the science of understanding how different drugs interact in our body. And if people are taking drugs that interact in a way that causes dementia, people present as having memory loss, potentially, or other forms, aggravation, behavior changes, etc. But it's a drug interaction. That's one. Number 2, urinary tract infections. My father was subject to this. He was 94 when he passed, but he was in a wheelchair, and he was sedentary, and he got a number of urinary tract infections. A lot of people in nursing homes and elsewhere are subject to this. And a UTI, or urinary tract infection, actually can cause delirium and confusion, and it mimics dementia. So if you get the right treatment and you get the the different drugs that you need, I'm not a doctor to know the drug part of it, but if you get the antibiotic, you can stop and reverse those conditions, right? People clear up like that. Another area is something called normal pressure hydrocephalus, NPH. And they call it normal, but it's not really normal. But they call it normal because it mimics normalcy. And what normal pressure hydrocephalus is, you've heard of the term water on the brain.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a buildup of fluid around and surrounding your brain, cerebral spinal fluid. And that buildup of that fluid presses, just kind of the way inflammation, right, does this to the brain tissue potentially. Think of this cerebral brain fluid pressing against your brain tissue. And what's normal about it is that it's not a sudden change. It's a gradual change. And people exist with this normal pressure hydrocephalus for years and exhibit dementia, but they get a shunt put in, drain the fluid, and they can potentially return to normal cognitive condition.
Now, is that something like my doctor would do if I develop those type of symptoms? That Would that be something they check out to determine?
They should.
Okay.
They
Is
should.
that common? But not common practice yet, I take it, because it's another test that has to be approved
You
by
got it.
someone, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there have been documented incidents, and probably way more than just a handful, of where when people are left with the normal pressure hydrocephalus, it basically permanently damages the brain. So the idea is definitely, if there's a cognitive issue, if you believe you're having severe memory loss, and you know it or somebody else shares with you that you are, then definitely you want to get into your primary care physician. You potentially want to get into a neurologist or a memory unit, a memory care type of workup unit. I'm not going to use the right term there, but they have memory centers in university settings where people can go and get a workup.
Okay.
And the whole idea is to eliminate potential causes for the dementia. And so it's a
Okay.
process of elimination that they may come to one or two conclusions. And typically those conclusions are really only probable conclusions.
Right.
Because you can't diagnose somebody 100% that they have Alzheimer's, the best way to say that is they have dementia consistent with Alzheimer's.
Okay.
That doesn't mean they have Alzheimer's, but it's consistent with it. And that's only because of the clinical presentation and the tests that they've done to eliminate all other forms of dementia.
Okay. At this point in my life, I forget things. I forget things more now than I did 10 years ago. There's no
Duh.
no question about
Okay.
that. Okay.
I do too.
Okay. How do you determine when it's like you're forgetting more? Is forgetting really an issue, or is maybe being disoriented and not knowing where you are? Is that something you look for?
Okay. Here's a couple things. I was stumbling on some words a few minutes ago, right? Now, if that was a permanent condition, that would be a problem. Why did I do that? Well, quite frankly, I'm under a little bit of stress. You got me in the spotlight. I'm having to talk. I'm having to come up with answers. And so, that's normal, right? It's also normal to misplace your keys. That's normal. What's not normal is to look at your keys and think to yourself, what do these do? That's different.
Not where was I going, but what do I do with them?
That's right.
Because I can have my keys in my hand and say, where the hell
Right.
is it going to go?
Right. Or if there are conditions that are part of dementia and other diseases where somebody looks at an apple and they call it an orange. So there, again, that would be a real indicator that there's a problem. And so some of the tests that they do include naming things. It includes counting backwards from 100 by threes. It includes...
Have you tried it?
Sure. 97, 93. No.
97, 93,
See?
did you say?
See? But see, so counting backwards, drawing a clock, right?
Okay.
There are a number of things that they because it's more than memory when it comes to dementia. People often hear of these memory centers, or somebody is living in a memory care facility. You've heard that, right?
Oh, yes.
So memory is just one of the things that get affected. The other several things that get affected are word finding is really partly memory, but it can be some other things. Executive function, not being able to understand processes, right? And being able to make decisions. And then the other thing are motor skills. And so not being able to properly put one foot in front of the other. And then the last part are behavior changes. So behavior changes can come about for a lot of different reasons. You can be truly angry because something happened, or you did something that you shouldn't have done, whatever. You're angry at yourself, you're angry at somebody else. And it's fleeting and it goes and everything's back to normal. But laughing, crying, getting angry, um, having delusions, hallucinations, these can all be part of a dementia. And some types of dementia, like Lewy body, which is a condition similar to Parkinson's, in that there's a certain type of protein deposit in somebody's brain that, depending on where it is, either is Parkinson's or Lewy body dementia. It all depends on where the protein is and how it's affecting you. But there are hallucinations that come along with that. So Robin Williams, do you remember Robin Williams?
Certainly do.
Great comedian.
Yes, indeed.
Post-mortem, he was diagnosed with Lewy body. So some of the troubles that he was having there had to do with his hallucinations and other things that were going on in his life. So you can see that it's kind of simple but complex at the same time.
Yes. Okay. We've talked about, the definitions. We've talked about some of the scientific things. But in practical ways, what do we do about it?
It's a great question. Yeah.
I'm at home. I have a partner who, I'm saying she's not doing so good.
Right.
What do I do? How do I?
Okay, good stuff.
Yeah.
This is where the really good stuff happens, right?
Okay.
Because it's not all negative, number one. We're all going to go from something, right? So we just need to manage it. If we end up with dementia, we need to manage it. And we need to do it in a way that's respectful, that's person-centered, that focuses on you and what your needs are. But in advance of having a dementia occur, what can we do to give us the most protection against having a dementia? Doesn't rule it out, doesn't make it impossible to happen, but what can we do that is going to make it less likely, reduces our risks? The number one thing we talked about already was heart health. Okay. So anything that we do that's good for the heart is good for the brain. Number two, we're doing it right now. You and me talking. Me and the rest of the team here talking. Anybody who is social is going to have some protective aspects to their brain health. Because when you start socializing with people, you have to, banter. You have to create conversation. There's stuff that's not even seen that goes on between people, right? But there's an energy between people. And so this type of social interaction is crucially important.
So
that's why meetings like this.
Talking to myself in my head, that doesn't count?
That's two people.
Because I do that a lot.
Hopefully it's limited to two people.
Yeah, it usually is.
But here's the thing.
Me, myself, and I.
Oh, yeah. The royal we.
Yes.
But here's the thing. When it comes to brain health, we want to talk about reserve capacity. And the best way to think about that is a lake. So if you're a boater, you ever been out in a boat? Okay. If you're in one of those man-made lakes where they filled it in with water, right? It was a valley between a couple of mountains or whatever. So they put water in there, they dammed up the river that flowed through there, it dammed up, and there's towns and there's rocks and there's all sorts of things beneath that water. And if you have the water high enough, you can zip around on your boat and you're doing fine. But as the water lowers with a drought, or they've released the dam, then the shoals stick up, or an old tree stump sticks up. And then boating is not as easy, right? So you got to navigate and you got to compensate. So the same is true with brain health. You have to create cognitive reserve. In other words, fill that lake water up to the top as best you can. Because as you age, the water's going to go down.
Right.
You just want to keep it from going down too quickly, too much.
And you're going to tell me how to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
So so we talked about heart health. We talked about socialization. The other big thing is education. Why is education so vitally important? Because it creates new neural pathways. So when you learn something new, you're exercising your brain. And this is dramatically demonstrated by somebody who loses their arms in, let's say, warfare. There's an accident, somebody blows up a bomb, whatever. They lose their arms. But they're able to use a bow and arrow. How?
Their teeth or their toes?
Yeah, their feet, right? They rewire their brain so that their feet are like their hands. Same is true with anybody. We can rewire a lot of our brain. And then one of the best ways to do it is speak another language or attempt to speak another language. And going along with that is travel. Put yourself in a place where you know nobody and you know nothing. You can't read the street signs. That will be very powerful in preventing, or at least attempting to prevent, the decline of your brain. So
I would think that would create stress.
yeah, but stress in a good way.
Yeah,
Stress in a good
okay,
way.
uh-huh.
Stress in a good way. So because you've got to figure it out, right?
Well, how about some of these games that you can get on the internet? Like for the last year or so, I've been using Luminosity.
Okay.
And there's different things like, it's all computer based.
Yes.
But still, it makes my mind have to think this or think that, or there's relationships and
Yes,
all that other
yes,
stuff.
yes.
Is that, I guess maybe that's something to do if I can't get out and socialize?
So the science is not 100% on those brain training games. In fact, there have been a lot of lawsuits about that.
Really?
And the Consumer Protection Agency has been involved with a lot of things like that. And that's not to say that Luminosity is not a good product or solution. I don't know. I've never even looked at it, and played it, I should say. But people talk about doing crosswords, similar. Doing Sudoku, similar. And in those areas, I would say that in those areas, I'm being given some cues here. Sorry, people. But in that way,
Should I be paying
it's more.
attention to these
It's
clues
I
too?
don't know. It's more repetitive, but it's more repetitive. It's using just one part of your brain. So the idea is that using one part of your brain is not the answer. So just doing math is not the answer. Using multiple parts of your brain is the answer. And that's when we get into things like creativity, music, art, dance, and so forth, because now you're using your physical body, you're listening to music, you're envisioning things, now everything is flowing. And it's pulling from different parts of your brain and making new neural connections. So learn to dance, take a dance class.
Gotcha, okay.
Like I said, try to speak another language or two. Put yourself in a travel situation. Get social with people. Do everything that you can to reduce the risk of diabetes, so sugar intake and manage your insulin and do those types of things. Alcoholism can be both, a problem and a preventive tool. There are a lot of studies about, red wine and so forth.
Right, okay.
So a little bit maybe, but not a lot. So those are the types of things that people really need to be doing. And if people retire or have retired, the thing is not to stop doing. Don't retire from life. Maybe you just retire from that particular job or career.
Gotcha, okay. Going back to helping my significant other, my spouse, it seems to me that would be somewhat of a full-time job or a very stressful thing to do.
Yes.
Not only how should I handle the situation,
Right.
Number one. And number two, how do I take care of myself in the process? Because I'm sure there'd be a lot of frustration that goes along with this.
Yes.
Okay?
Denial, in fact.
Denial that it's happening. What should I do for them? What should I do for me?
Okay. So the number one thing you can do is keep yourself healthy.
Okay.
Okay. So being healthy yourself protects you and them. If you've ever been in a plane and they say in the event of an emergency where the oxygen falls from the ceiling, put the mask on yourself first before you help others.
Okay.
Well, that's because you have to be good before you can help somebody else be good.
Understood.
So that's number one. And number two is honesty. You know, and it's a sensitive area. People really do. Your mind is who you are in many cases, right? It's your soul, it's your being, it's who you are, it's everything about you. So when there's an issue with that, it's very disturbing and scary. But the way to overcome that scariness is to talk about it more openly, right? It's just like talking about death. You know, the more you can kind of be comfortable with the discussion, the better off you are. You're less afraid of it.
Sure.
And so finances, death, taxes, dementia, cancer, you know, things that are really, you know, kind of big in people's lives are tough discussions. But the more you do it, the better you are going to be able to handle the next steps.
Right.
So if somebody in your life or you yourself are experiencing cognitive issues, you know, it's a sign to get it looked at and not to simply accept old age.
Right.
And we talked about the difference between where you put your keys and what the keys do. So the other thing is if you yourself are the one with the issue and you kind of know it in many cases, maybe you don't verbalize it or want to come to terms with it, but be open to listening to others say to you,
Right.
you know, I want to share with you that you've been repeating some things, and I know that's not normal for you, and I would like us to get this checked out. And then, if and when that diagnosis ever does come in, and that can take a couple of years, so they got to test somebody, and then retest, and then retest again to see whether that's a decline. And as that decline goes on, you really have to start thinking at the outset, what do I need to be doing? I need to be making my home safer to live in. I need to be thinking about stopping driving. I need to be thinking about my will and my powers of attorney and other documents that I need to sign while I'm able to sign them. I want to think about talking with people, friends, family that I may have disconnected from, but get reconnected to them. And I basically want to prepare myself for that eventuality. And if you've prepared yourself and you never end up really exhibiting dementia, you're still far ahead.
Right. I would think so.
Okay?
I would think
That's
so.
what we would do.
Okay. Well, I guess that's come to the end of our time here, but there is one more thing
Okay.
that I wanted to ask you
Can I put a
about.
pitch in
Wait a
before we
minute,
do
wait a
that?
minute,
Okay.
wait a minute,
All right. All right.
Okay.
Talk to me.
You're a nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
You must have to do some fundraising.
Yeah, we accept donors, absolutely. We
Okay.
love donors, yes.
Well, I know that there is a fundraiser that you do
Yes,
that seems to help out with keeping the brain health.
Right.
Could you tell us about that?
Sure.
I
I have a
believe you
minute.
call it the walk,
well, yeah, so,
and also put that up.
all
there.
right,
Go
okay.
ahead, go ahead.
Well, but we are a nonprofit. It's the Dementia Society of America, and it's dementiasociety.org. That's our website, dementiasociety.org. And we're all volunteer, so there's no paid staff. I'm the president and chairman, but I'm not paid for anything, and nobody else is paid in the organization as a staff person or board member. Nobody gets paid. So we do it, because we want to do it. And that's number one. Number two is we're all dementias. So we talked about Alzheimer's, but we also mentioned all the others. Vascular dementia, traumatic brain injury, mixed dementia, Lewy body, frontal temporal, all the ones that we talked about. So people can come to the website and there's definitions on all of those and more resources. That's number one. Number two, we do an annual, not a fundraiser, but an awareness raiser, and it's called Step 2 Raise. Step, S-T-E-P, the number 2, Raise, R-A-I-S-E, Step 2 Raise. And Step 2 Raise is a chance for people to wear something like a Fitbit, so like what I've got here, right? And basically, this counts my steps, and then we're going to together walk across America. So if you step 8,000 steps a day, and I step 7,000 steps a day, Together, we're doing 15,000 steps a day, and we add up all of those steps in order to walk across America from coast to coast. And we do that between Mother's Day and Father's Day. So
Okay.
it's 36 days this year. And last year, we succeeded in walking across America, so I'm hoping we can do it again this year.
Okay.
People can sign up. It's free. There's no fundraising involved. We're not looking for people to donate. We're simply looking for people to learn about dementia and brain health and to give themselves their own brain health by walking. 10,000 steps a day. That's what I want you to do.
Walking is a good thing, too.
It's a great thing.
For sure. Well, before we close out here, folks, we do have an audience here. You may not realize that, but they are back there. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to pose to Kevin before we?
You know, living as long as you can in your own home is really helpful and important, you know, and depending on who you are and the amount of family or friends that you have around you, that may or may not be possible, right? If you live in a home with 3 flights of steps and your bedroom's on the 3rd floor and there's no chance that you're going to put a bedroom on the 1st floor, it gets challenging over time. But if somebody can modify their house to make it more easily livable as you age, it's called aging in place. There are simple things, right? Making door knobs levers, right, instead of having the round slippery doorknob. Taking up throw rugs that can get in the way, and you know, removing those types of obstructions. But then it also goes to things even as simple as where you put the knives in the house, right, in the kitchen. Simple things like automatic lights, so you don't have to be searching for lights in the middle of the night. So there are people out there, and we can help people find those people that help with the aging in place. And so there are a lot of folks out there in the country doing it, and we can connect people to it. So that goes back to the whole issue of vascular health. And in fact, you know, there are all sorts of things going on. Not being a medical doctor, you know, all I would say is that, yeah, having the test to make sure that there's not some type of buildup in the arteries is crucially important. The other thing is in terms of supplements. Let's just say, broadly based speaking, supplements. So ginkgo biloba, you know, is one. People are also taking resveratrol. People are taking coconut oil. People are taking turmeric. People are taking a lot of vitamin D. There's a lot of different supplements that people want to take that think will do something. I would say that the science, if it were absolutely clear, you know, would have everybody taking them, but it isn't. So I think that it's all about person-centeredness. It's also all about what you believe has worked. So there's, you know, the power of the placebo is extremely critical to that discussion. So, you know, people, we do know one thing, that you are what you eat, you know? So if you eat a lot of sugars, a lot of fats, if you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, if you eat a lot of fiber, you know, these are all contributory things to your overall health. So anything that you're doing to improve your overall health is going to be critically important to your dementia and your brain, you know, in terms of being protective and in terms of being not protective. So drug trials, you know, do operate throughout the country. We can put people into drug trials. We have a program that can connect people to a local drug trial. You know, we operate nationally, but we also operate here in the Delaware Valley. So we can help people in the Central Bucks area just as much as in Des Moines or Los Angeles. But there are a lot of qualifications to get into those drug trials. So part of that challenge is do you qualify to be part of it? And depending on if you have dementia or don't have dementia, and at what stage you might be in that process, changes whether you're a candidate for the drug trial. A lot of people get tested to be candidates, but don't end up actually qualifying. But we encourage people. You know, it's just like cancer trials. They need people to participate in these trials. So what I would say to our audience in general is that if there is a diagnosed form of dementia and there are drug trials relevant to your type of dementia and you qualify for them, do them. It helps everybody. So Lewy body, do you know anything about Lewy bodies at all?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. So Lewy was a doctor, just like Alzheimer was a doctor. I think they were both Austrian. And they were in and around the same time, early 1900s. And Lewy, L-E-W-Y, came up with this, basically this disease state based on the type of protein that he was seeing in the brains of people with this so-called Lewy body. And depending on where the Lewy bodies were in the brain, where these protein deposits were, would either make it all Parkinson's, with the tremors and the inability to ambulate and other things, or ultimately they learned that if they were in a different part of the brain, it would lead to a full-blown Lewy body dementia. So it's kind of a spectrum condition where you have from Lewy body dementia to Parkinson's and kind of everything in between. But it has to do with these protein deposits that this Dr. Lewy discovered back in the early 1900s. I would say that's a generally good way to say it. The issue is that dementia is because it's more than memory, it's a cognitive impairment that affects your daily activities of daily living, and that it progresses over time. That is the true definition of a dementia. So it's not just forgetfulness, because that alone isn't dementia. It's actually a combination of things that affect your daily living. They call them ADLs, activities of daily living, that progressively get worse. And if a doctor can see the progression and the severity of the cognitive impairment is sufficient enough, that would be diagnosed as dementia. And then they would like to know, if possible, what form of dementia it is. And so that's where they start to do, really in conjunction with that dementia diagnosis, they're going to be doing tests to try to eliminate certain things.
The reason that I'd like to bring that up
Okay.
right now, the reason that I'd like to bring Well, Kevin, it was
All
a
right.
delightful,
No, my
interview.
pleasure,
So
my pleasure.
I'm sure everybody got a lot of good stuff out of it today. So carry on, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. That's it. We'll see you next month.